Witam Państwa serdecznie, Błażej Hrapkowicz, jesteśmy w Toruniu, EnergaCAMERIMAGE, and our guests are director Kenneth Branagh. Hello.
Hello.
Cinematographer Haris Zambarloukos.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry, okay, so we can talk in Polish. Fantastic. How are you? Everything okay?
Very good, thank you very much.
Before we talk about Belfast, one sentence to you. Recently, I turned on the TV and there was Frankenstein. And I just wanted to tell you, I still love this film.
Thank you very much.
It's grandeur, it's over-the-top quality. Brilliant.
Thank you. We actually just were involved in a very extensive digital restoration of the film, so you'll see it in an excellent new home entertainment version in a few months. So we're very excited about that.
Fantastic news. Moving on to Belfast, you said it is of course a personal film, but it is also political. I mean, I think you cannot divide these two. And in today's context of Brexit and of another issue with the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, was that context also somehow in the back of your mind when making the film?
Well, as you say, it's unavoidable because it's an area of the world that has been always complex in its political makeup. The Brexit side of it is now just yet one more version of how complicated these things can be. But the film of Belfast was trying to understand how a 9-year-old can contemplate or comprehend how those complexities are to be negotiated in his own simple life, which is dominated by football, a girl called Catherine, religion, difficult, and movies. So, you know, he has what you might say many other people have set against these big, overwhelming political issues. He has what you might call an ordinary life that he is trying to maintain or protect or evolve. But he's 9 years old and living in a world of sort of catastrophic change and very violent change. So I think that tension between the personal and the political is kind of, in some ways, is what being Irish is often about.
When I was watching the film, I was asking myself this question, that is it really possible to lead an ordinary life in such a circumstance? And I think your film shows that it is in some way, but it's not that ordinary.
No, I suppose there is a way to navigate, but independence of thought is very difficult. Like our own world here in America, in the UK, what people now refer to constantly, the polarizing of opinions and ideas, tribalism. There's a line in the film, if you're not with us, you're against us.
It's a problem everywhere in the world right now.
Yeah, and I don't know why really this new 21st century issue that does not allow, well, you even think of a referendum for a complex issue, yes or no for Brexit, it's so much more complicated than that. Yes, so it's that refusal to admit the grey areas is you know, one of the issues at play in the film. But it's the sort of also, I think, the rapidity, the speed at which violent change can happen, and the unthinking power of the crowd or the mob can take over. So I think so many people have said to us in watching the film, that's my story, except they come from Iran or Nigeria or Haiti, and so it seems, alas, the film specific about Belfast has a sort of universal application.
Kenneth just mentioned about this all being filtered through a 9-year-old perspective. From your point of view, Haris, what was the sort of idea for a visual representation of that 9-year-old perspective and the world of the film?
Well, I believe there's a kind of closed door for children sometimes that you have to peer through, or a window. You never get a very clear view of things. So we wanted to show it in that way. So the angles were always not at eye level. Ken and I spent a lot of time on the floor behind a chair or on a ladder. It didn't have to represent his height. It just had to represent the fact that it wasn't always so clear. And when we wanted to be very direct, and when someone was talking to young Buddy, we were very, very direct and very clear, but we often peered into the world of adults. But you know, there's always something that catches your, for me at least, that you have to kind of encapsulate the story or what wanted to what we wanted to say, and it helps make visuals and talk and have a rapport. And for me, there was a phrase that the Dalai Lama used about living in exile, living away from home, which seemed to be appropriate, you know, a similar suffering. And he always talked about the joyful participation in the sorrows of life. And that was really what we were very, very conscious of, that these parents, they tried to maintain the joyful aspect of life for this child and protect his childhood. And we were very conscious about photographing with that in mind.
Given what you just said, the shots that really stayed with me from this film, there are many of them, for example, the shot of the father with this angle from very low angle, and these shots that make this world big or somehow not entirely realistic. So I guess that's what you're saying, that if, from a child's perspective, a father and an adult is a huge figure. Yeah. So I guess that is what you were going for also.
Yes, and also maybe we were very conscious of making two actions happen simultaneously. So even something simple like a conversation between two sisters is happening during a basketball game. We put the camera right on the ground and shot through their feet. So it's constantly reminding us, you know, we would always put a soldier in the background or a soldier that crosses the foreground. I think these were all, you know, it's not a simple world, and we all have to coexist, and there's always things that kind of layer up your experience and your point of view. So I think we were just conscious always to find interesting ways of doing that without having to cut to it.
Yeah, there were two related things. One, as you were sort of saying, is that the boy's point of view becomes furtive. He becomes like a spy in his own life. He has to. It's the only way he'll find out information, because people are withholding it. They're talking about it late at night. They're talking about it behind barricades. So he has to. So we take his furtive perspective, but also at 9 years, what have you got to filter it through? And one crude means is the world of the Western. And so the shot you mentioned was very much with the idea of a figure in a Western, the father going out to the edge of the ranch with the mother.
About classical Hollywood films, also Westerns and film noir, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that was on television. Those were ways that I, you know, began to understand something about, at least in fictional form, good and evil. Yeah. Bad guys, good guys, and the hope that in those kinds of melodramas that the good guy got the girl. But certainly our bad guy, Billy Clanton, has raven black hair, just like, for instance, the actor Jack Palance as the villain in the great Western Shane. Yeah. And he's a sort of prototype or archetype of a villain, flashing eyes, lush black hair, like midnight, oily hair, and very dangerous.
One last short thing on this Western subject. High Noon, the hero, the character watches High Noon, and I thought about that High Noon is about whether to stay or to go, and it's a moral choice. And this is very similar to what's going on in your film, whether to stay or to go. The family has a choice to make, and it is an existential but also a moral choice. So I think there's a dialogue between your film and High Noon in some way.
Yeah, I think that my parents and people that I saw in similar situations became aware of what an enormous issue it was, and that it was very complex. On one level, it's simple: shall we leave the dangerous place or stay? But it's more complicated than that, because shall we leave our extended family? Should we leave the family of the street? Should we leave the certainty of identity, of place, of home, of accent? So it's going to be a sort of a revolutionary decision to make. And yeah, films were dramatizing. Now, I was particularly pleased to show a clip from High Noon, because on my very first film as director, a visitor to the set one day to see his friend, the actor Paul Schofield, who was in the film, was Fred Zinnemann, who had directed High Noon. So I had a few moments in his company. It was a personal thrill to include one of his greatest movies.
Thank you very much for talking to us and for being at the festival. Great to have you here.
It's a pleasure.
Dziękujemy.